A lawsuit has been filed against ESP Guitars in the state of Wisconsin by one of their former dealers. Why? Well, it links back to a story we covered on the channel about 3 months ago. I'll do a brief recap, but if you want to watch the old video, it's linked in the description. The most expensive guitars that ESP make are their custom shop models, and only specific dealers are allowed to order these guitars. And they can cost quite a bit of money, so if you're selling a lot of them as a dealer, there's a lot of money to be made. But it's not uncommon for there to be a bit of a wait for these guitars. A year, year and a half, sometimes even 2 years long wait since the order. One such dealer that specialised in these guitars was Chondro Guitars based in Wisconsin. I hear that it might be pronounced Chondro or Chondro, but I'm dyslexic, I'm just rolling with Chondro. But the pronunciation isn't all that important. What is that in late March of 2023, Chondro alerted all of the brands that it stocked that it had planned to close its shop. They were closing their physical store, but they still wanted to fulfill the orders that they had made, and this does somewhat make sense considering that some of these guitars would have been ordered over a year prior. According to Chondro, all the brands that it stocked agreed to this, including ESP, and Facebook posts from Chondro state somewhat similar from around the time. But then on May 19th, ESP contacted Chondro and alerted them that their dealership agreement was terminated and that their orders were cancelled. ESP said this: "As your storefront is now closed, we have decided to discontinue doing business with Chondro Guitars. Effective immediately, we will no longer be shipping guitars to you, and your existing orders will be cancelled." Suffice to say, the owner of Chondro was less than pleased at this news, and posted this email, along with a few choice words, to the Customer Chondro Facebook group. From there it spread around and ended up in some ESP Guitars Facebook groups too. After this went public and customers seeing that existing orders were being cancelled, and some of those were their orders, there was a little bit of concern there. And perhaps to ease this concern, it would seem that ESP instructed some of its custom shop dealers to post publicly that they could accept the Chondro orders in place. Why this would be a problem for Chondro is that the guitars were effectively sold. They were sold by Chondro, and if their custom shop builds, all the custom shop speccing and work with the customer was done by them. So if other dealers start fulfilling those orders, then they essentially did a lot of the work for free. A good and plausible reason for ESP wanting to do this could be that there's a level of after-sales service on these custom shop orders that are only provided through dealers, and if Chondro are closing their storefront, they won't be able to provide that. But also, cutting Chondro out completely from the sales that they made was bound to have negative effects, and that's what we're seeing today. At the time of all this happening, Randall, the owner of Chondro, posted this video on Facebook.
"Let's not take what ESP did to me and use it against other dealers, because they've done nothing to me. This fight is between me and ESP, and pretty soon that's going to hit the court system."
And that's sort of where the story ended. We didn't know anything up until just a few days ago when Randall started making some posts about the situation on the Chondro Facebook group, and he posted a cease and desist that ESP sent him just a few days after we covered the story on this channel. "We've recently been made aware that you, either acting as an individual or on behalf of Chondro Guitars, have engaged in or continue to engage in communications including various posts on social media that reference ESP. We have reason to believe that the aforementioned communications contain blatantly false information, are malicious in nature, and are defamatory as to ESP. It is believed that in order to cast a blemish upon ESP's reputation, you have intentionally misled the public by stating that ESP's termination of Chondro Guitars has or will cause customers to be saddled with unfulfilled orders or lost deposits." To be fair, ESP's email didn't exactly indicate something else. They said, "Effective immediately, we will no longer be shipping guitars to you and your existing orders will be cancelled." This is patently false, as it is evident from ESP's communication with you, which make clear that when you advised ESP that you needed to close your brick and mortar location, ESP repeatedly asked you for a list of pre-sold instruments, such that ESP could facilitate the fulfillment of all the customer orders. The fact of the matter is that you never provided ESP with a response to its request for the list of pre-sold instruments. Furthermore, it is believed that you have made false and or for misleading comments about ESP's unvetted right to terminate Chondro Guitars as ESP's authorized dealer and the basis of ESP's decision. The fact of the matter is that ESP's decision was entirely justified and proper under the law. So in making these communications to thousands of people via social media, it is believed that you have sought to cause irreparable harm to ESP's reputation and to injure its business. We demand that you and or Chondro Guitars immediately cease and desist from publishing any defamatory statements about ESP from this point forward, should you fail, and then there's a threat of litigation. I will say one thing, it personally strikes me as a little bit of a vague cease and desist. It's not quite specific on what he said. Normally, or it's not uncommon to see, you said this, and it's an exact quote, and you said it here, at this time. There is none of that. And it's somewhat ironic, because they threatened to sue him for saying that ESP didn't have the legal right to terminate the contract. Now he's suing ESP because he's stating that ESP didn't have the legal right to terminate the contract. So let's look at that lawsuit. So this is the legal complaint. If you want to see them all individually, everything, it's all on the Chondro Facebook group, and I'll link that in the description. But there are three main complaints in this particular case. I'll just read a little bit of the factual background bit. We've covered most of it, really. A large percentage of the Chondro Guitars revenue was derived from the sale of ESP products. On or about the 24th of March 2023, Chondro Guitars notified all of its vendors, including ESP, that it intended to close the storefront, but only after fulfilling all outstanding orders, some of which had been pending for over a year. ESP acknowledged Chondro Guitars' notification and confirmed it would fulfill all outstanding orders. Then, on or about May 19th, 2023, without any advance notice, ESP did an about-face and notified Chondro via email correspondence that it was terminating the distribution agreement effective immediately. Specifically, ESP's email correspondence stated, quote, "As your storefront is now closed, we have decided to discontinue doing business with Chondro Guitars. Effective immediately, we will no longer be shipping guitars to you, and your existing orders will be cancelled." Chondro Guitars did not break the dealership agreement, and its decision to begin closing its storefront while fulfilling all outstanding orders does not constitute an event of default as defined in Section 18 of the dealership agreement. Side note, we don't have the dealership agreement that we can show. Section 18 further states in relevant part the following, quote, "The termination of the agreement will not affect the rights, liabilities and obligations of the parties with respect to transactions entered into before the effective date of termination." ESP breached Section 18 of the dealership agreement by cancelling all outstanding orders placed through Chondro Guitars. In the event ESP wished to terminate the dealership agreement absent by default, it was required to give Chondro a 30-day advance notice under Section 3 of the dealership agreement. Okay. ESP failed to provide Chondro Guitars with any advance notice. After terminating the dealership agreement and cancelling all outstanding orders, ESP, through one of its agents and or other authorized dealers, encouraged Chondro Guitars customers to contact other ESP dealers and promised that these other dealers would honour any orders initially placed through Chondro Guitars. To date, Chondro Guitars has not received all contractual benefits under the dealership agreement, including anticipated revenue from any of the outstanding orders at the time ESP terminated the dealership agreement. So that's all kind of, or at least a lot of it, is what we already knew from the initial story. Although the part about the dealership agreement, again, we can't see the dealership agreement, but considering it's quoting, I think it was whatever, Section 18 or something like that, where it states that even if they did terminate it, they were still obligated to fulfill the things that were done before the termination. That's a big point. Let's continue and see what they're actually suing for. So the first thing that they're suing for is breach of contract. We've kind of already covered that in what we've just read, but the second cause of action is the violation of the Wisconsin's Fair Dealership Law. This is actually quite an interesting one, and I will link an article that kind of explains it a lot further. But basically in Wisconsin, it's a law that protects the dealers with a relationship between dealer and manufacturer, or dealer and supplier, and it kind of favors the dealer in a lot of cases. So I'll read a little bit here on this particular point. A lot of this is just sort of trying to argue the point that it does fall under the Wisconsin Fair Dealership Law, but the main point is here. They state that ESP violated Wisconsin statute by terminating the dealership agreement without good cause as defined by Wisconsin statute. Additionally, to the extent that good cause is shown to exist, ESP failed to provide proper notice of termination or substantial changes in competitive circumstances as required by that statute. And they're stating that because of ESP's violations of the Wisconsin Fair Dealership Law, Chondro have suffered and they are entitled to damages, recovery costs, attorney fees, and all of that. The third and final class that they're suing ESP for is tortious interference, and this is primarily just about the other dealers being involved because they were allegedly told by ESP to get involved. Chondro Guitars has valid and enforceable contracts with third parties and also has prospective contractual relationships with third parties for the sale and or servicing of ESP products. ESP knew or reasonably should have known of the existence of these contracts and prospective contracts. ESP has intentionally interfered with Chondro's customer contracts and prospective contracts by deliberately terminating the dealership agreement without notice and or without good cause. ESP further intentionally interfered with Chondro Guitars' customer contracts and prospective contracts by, through one of its agents and or other authorized dealers, directing all Chondro Guitars customers who purchased an ESP product through Chondro Guitars to go to another authorized ESP dealer who would honor these customers' orders, ineffectively diverting business from Chondro Guitars. ESP's intentionally interfering conduct has deprived Chondro Guitars of the means of performance and has caused non-performance of third-party contracts. ESP's interference has also prevented Chondro Guitars from entering into prospective contracts with third parties. ESP's interference was improper and without privilege or justification. As a direct and proximate result, ESP's interference, Chondro Guitars has sustained pecuniary damage. Alright, I think you get the point. They're not particularly happy with ESP, and for that they're suing them for damages, punitive damages. They want remedies available under Chapter 135 of the Wisconsin statutes. That's probably the fair dealership laws. They want attorney fees and costs, and the amounts are later to be determined, and this was filed on the 22nd of June 2023. So that's the news. ESP are in fact being sued by one of their ex-dealers. In fact, a dealer that ESP gave an achievement award to, kind of adding insult to injury there. But that's the story. We don't know who will win, and if we do, I'll let you know. Thank you for watching, and I'll see you next time. Bye bye!